We're talking with Ted Cruz's father, Rafael Cruz, who knows firsthand the situation in Cuba. He lived through it. And, sir, could we ask you your opinion now as to what you feel is the reasoning behind what Obama is doing and whether or not you agree with it?
Well, let me tell you what Obama did regarding Cuba is a total disaster. But it is something that goes along with what Obama does all over the world, and it is trying to appease our enemies. He just presents weakness before our enemies. You got to realize that Cuba is a communist regime. It's a regime that has been exporting terrorism for decades. Back in the 1970s, there were Cuban communist guerrillas fighting in Angola in a communist revolution. There were Cuban communist guerrillas fighting with the FARC in Colombia, communist insurrection. Just a month before Obama's thing about Cuba, there was a ship stopped in Panama coming from Cuba with sugar on top and a bunch of weapons underneath going to North Korea. Cuba is still involved in training terrorists for all over the world and still in insurrection and terrorism. Not only that, the Cuban regime, when they imposed communism, of course, they destroyed the economy in Cuba. And so the USSR supported the Cuban government with millions and millions of dollars until the demise of the USSR. Then Chavez in Venezuela began, just sending millions of dollars to Cuba. But now oil has dropped to about half its price. Venezuela is hurting economically. So now when the situation in Cuba was such that the Cuban economy is really in trouble, and it may be bad enough to cause that regime to crumble, here comes Obama throwing a lifeline to the Castros. And I'll tell you, the excuse that that's going to help the Cuban people is a lie. It's only going to help the fat cats at the top of the Cuban communist government.
Well, Castro's even said, we're not going to change anything. He's admitted it.
Oh, absolutely. Castro was very defiant, practically laughing at Obama. But let me tell you something else. Since 1962, right after the October crisis, if you remember, 1962, USSR had installed rocket silos with nuclear warheads in Cuba, 90 miles from the U.S., and it was only because of the October blockade that those were removed. But we have to realize that since then, in 1962, Cuba was banned from the Organization of American States. One of the statements that Obama said was, "We will be delighted to welcome Raúl Castro to Panama in April for the next meeting of the Organization of American States." And so Obama was saying, I hope I can embrace you. So they are welcoming them back to the Organization of American States, to where they can promote their communism throughout Latin America. So it is a farce. But it's typical of Obama. Our allies don't respect us. Our enemies laugh at us. You cannot work in the international arena through weakness. We need to go back to what Reagan so clearly called peace through strength. And Reagan put it very simply when they asked him, what is your foreign policy? And he said very simply, we win, they lose. It's that simple.
This might blow this for the Democrats. Not that I mind, but this might, cause enough of an uproar to actually blow Southern Florida for the Democrat Party.
Yeah. Well, and there's something else. There's something else that may be very helpful in Florida. And that is, there's a large Jewish population in Florida. Obama is the most anti-Israel administration in this country ever. Totally antagonistic to the nation of Israel. And I think more and more Jewish people are going to wake up to the fact that Obama is not a friend of Israel.
No, unfortunately, though, there's very much a non-religious big block of Jewish voters that will always vote Democrat. It's what I grew up with in my family as a Union family. And, you know, my father, until he was about 80 years old, finally voted for a Republican.
I would hope that when they see what's happening in Europe, that they would start.
What happened to never
see the
forget?
handwriting on the wall.
Look at the New York Times.
But you know something, I think that is changing.
I hope so.
Let me tell you something very telling. The number one speaker at Passover celebrations around the U.S. this year is Ted Cruz. Ted is the most sought after speaker for Passover celebrations this year because Ted has stood defending Israel like nobody else. And so they are realizing that they can't rely upon this administration. I mean, just look what happened this last week when Iran made public that they're building 2 other nuclear reactors.
And missile silos. And
with the blessings of the Obama administration.
They're dragging it. They're dragging it across the finish line to let Iran get nukes to change the whole chemistry and the whole balance of power in the Middle East against Israel. And the other thing that gets me as far as Israel is concerned, and doesn't get me, I should say, that I found, you know, really a huge positive. One of the greatest men I've ever met in all the years of working in politics was Benjamin Netanyahu. I had the pleasure of meeting him at the Fox News channel. And he exudes that certain leadership quality that I wish that we had, you know, 8 years ago in this country, and I see it in your son.
Yeah, well, my son has already met 3 times with Benjamin Netanyahu. And I'll tell you, they, of course, you know, they realize that the liberal press is all against Israel. It's this liberal progressivism that is just make Israel as the perpetrator instead of the one that is being victimized. Even when there were thousands of rockets falling on Israel, they were calling Israel the provocator. So you can't rely on the liberal news to get the truth. But I'll tell you, more and more Jewish people are coming to realize that they can't rely upon the Obama administration to support them. And actually, as Ted mentioned yesterday in his speech, it was him who raised the voice when the Obama administration shut down Ben Gurion Airport. And he said, what are you doing, an economic boycott against Israel?
Exactly.
And within a day and a half, they restored those flights. And you know, they are acting as much as they can to block Israel. Well, you heard not too long ago, just a couple of years ago, Obama pushing for pre-1967 borders in Israel, which would make Israel totally indefensible. Only 9 miles wide at the narrowest point. I mean, I've been to Israel. Israel is a very tiny country, and they want to make it even smaller. And it is surrounded by people that hate Israel. So to make Israel seem like they are the bully when they're a very, very small nation surrounded by 300 million people that are not friends of Israel.
And see, what gets me, you mentioned, you know, the mainstream media, the New York Times, Schulzbergers, they're Jewish. What happened to never again? You know, and it's happening. We have a president who's silent with Christians being slaughtered at massive rates, the most I've ever seen in my lifetime for sure, across the Middle East and North Africa. Nothing. Boko Haram is never even hardly talked about except hashtag Save Our Girls. Come on.
Well, you see, the president is more concerned with being politically correct than with taking stand.
I believe he's owned by the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, he just doesn't want to make any waves, and actually he doesn't take a stand. But I'll tell you, perhaps we also need to blame the Christian leadership for staying silent for so long. We can't continue to remain silent. We have to shout it from the housetops, like Jesus said. And I think so much has happened to push Christianity to the background because too many Christian leaders are being silent.
Yeah.
And I say silent no more. We need to be involved in the civic society because only then can we have an impact upon our civic society.
All I can say is, to me, the American people and the man on the street that I talk to all the time is just starved for leadership.
That's right.
And your son is in the forefront of that, thank God. And hopefully there will be others like Mike Lee,
Thank you.
that can stand.
Thank you. I appreciate your support. Mike is a great friend, and Mike is probably, without a doubt, Ted's closest ally in the Senate.
Problem is, though, we need him in the Senate, though, I hate to say it. It's so important that he stays in the Senate, too, because it's such a hard thing.
Well, we have to see where he could exert the most influence to change this country for the better.
Well, it's great. And thank you so much for what you went through and for just having such a wonderful son.
Well, I am so proud to be an American. It is a privilege and a blessing.
Yep.
To be in this great country. This is the greatest country on the face of the earth, and this is a country worth saving. And each one of us has to be engaged